Right, so firstly, welcome everybody, and thank you very much for registering to our tax and legal update for Expatriates webinar. This event is a follow-up to the previous event, which was held in July, and a recording can be found on Chase Buchanan's YouTube channel. We are holding these events to inform people who live in Spain or looking to move on about updates to Spanish legislation and tax rules. Because there's so much information available online, but many people don't know where to find it, where to start, what information they can trust. So this webinar is hosted by myself, John Diking, Sally Myburgh, Javier, Ruiz, and we have a new guest today as well, Kelly Summerell, Director for Mediterranean Homes, who has many years' experience of helping people settle down on the inland areas of Costa del Sol. So Javier is an experienced lawyer based in Malaga. He's helping his clients with everything they need to do to set up a new life in Spain, including visa and residency permits. Sally is a co-administrator of a Facebook group for expatriates. Her group is called After Brexit in Spain, which she runs with her colleague Rachel Warnes. And she has helped over 27,000 members over the years, which include both people who already live in Spain or are looking to move on. I am a private wealth manager at Chase Buchanan. I help expatriates with the financial planning linked to savings, investments, and pensions, and make sure that their assets are tax efficient here in Spain. And I would like to offer everyone who has registered for this event for complimentary financial review. So please get in touch if you'd like to benefit from this. If you have any questions during the event, then please write them in the chat box and we will discuss them in the end. At the end of this webinar, you'll find our contact details. So if you have any questions which you want to discuss with us on an individual basis, please get in touch with us after the event. Right, let's start with the slideshow. So we're gonna first look at the topics we're gonna cover off. So we're gonna look at Spanish visa, freedom of movement through EU citizenship, wealth tax in Spain, inheritance tax in Spain, and inland property regulations. So let's start with Spanish visa. Over to you, Sally.
Hi, thank you. Yes, a quick visa update. There have been a few changes since, well, even since July. First of all, anybody who's in the UK who's applying for a visa, all visas now are processed through BLS. London, Manchester and Edinburgh, they all have a BLS office. The consulates are not actually dealing with anything now. They process the visas, but it is all done through BLS. But BLS have had huge teething problems. So if you find that the appointment section on their website doesn't work, then you need to ring them or to email them. And they do have a contact details for doing that. Okay. I also want to just quickly touch on something which is absolutely in the news at the moment, all over. It was just in Spain and in some of the expat publications. It's now in the national press in the UK. This is business of Spain scrapping the 90-day and 180-day EU, well, Schengen agreement. They cannot scrap that. What they can do is produce a visa, a new national visa, as France have already done, to say that people who are owners of properties and possibly even swallows or anybody else who wants to apply can apply for a 6-month visa. But it's really not confirmed that this is even being discussed. What has happened is Hector Gomez, who is the Secretary of State in Spain for Trade and Tourism, was at the World Travel Market this week. He had a meeting apparently with Jennifer Anderson. Jennifer Anderson is the Director of Consulate Affairs and Crisis, whatever that means. But it is believed that they did speak about the 90 and 180-day limit. We have absolutely no idea what they actually said. This has all come originally from somebody in apparently the UK government who spoke to the Mallorca Daily Bulletin. And from there, it's gone into mega hype. It is, of course, riding on the back of the fact that in France, the Senate have voted to do this visa. The French government have made it very clear they are not going to pass the visa because there is already a 6-month visa. So what will happen with France, it's very unlikely that they will create a new visa for second homeowners. But anybody who's interested in that, there is a Facebook group called 180 Days in Spain. It's run by one of our members, Andrew Hasselden, and it is for lobbying the UK and the Spanish government to get them to start thinking about giving people the opportunity for a 6-month visa. Okay. Now on to the digital nomad visa. There have been a few things come out of this. It wasn't a very well set up visa. It was a sort of tacked on to the latest the startup law. It wasn't really thought through very well. So the UGE, which is basically the unit of large business in Madrid, are sort of having to make it up as they go along. And there's a number of things that have come out of it. One of it is they have said that only the UK, Russia, and certain EU countries are actually able to provide a document which is called the A1 in England, which allows the social security link up. But we do know that there are other consulates around the world that are accepting other documents. So if you're in America, there is no document, that we do know. The alternative, of course, is that you apply for the digital nomad visa as an autonomo, a self-employed person, and then the whole issue goes out the window. And they've also said that employers who have been promising to sign up to Social Security in Spain after the visa is granted, that will no longer be permitted. The Social Security aspect has to be dealt with before the visa will be issued. There are still some complications over Beckham's law, and the two things I would say is this. Firstly, unless you're earning over 60,000, it probably isn't worth it. You have to apply for it anyway. It's not automatic. Secondly, it only applies to employees on the visa, not to people who are self-employed or on contract. They cannot have the Beckham's law arrangement. Okay, they've also confirmed now that partners who apply with the visa holder for the work and residency visa have to be either married or civil partnership. They will not accept undocumented long-term cohabitation partnerships. However, if you have children and on their birth certificate it's very clear that you have been together for a long time, that might count. And I think it will depend on the consulate and on the person you're talking to that particular day. Okay. Self-employed applicants must qualify with clients who are businesses. If they just have individuals, and we have had inquiries from people who are perhaps marriage counsellors or counsellors of some sort, all of whose clients are just individual people, it cannot count for the visa. You can have them as well, but to count for the visa, to actually qualify, you have to have a 3-month at least relationship with an actual business which has been in operation for at least a year. The other thing that they've now said, having said originally that they would allow savings to make up the difference if you don't have enough income, they've now said they will only allow a very, very small proportion of savings or income from other sources. The bulk of the income to qualify has to be from the work that you're doing for the visa. Right. Quickly going on to the golden visa, this is a bit of an odd one. The golden visa, as we call it, is the property part of the investor's visa. It's the part of the visa that says if you buy a property for €500,000 unfinanced, so no mortgage, no borrowing, then you can apply for the golden visa. And the golden visa allows you to come and go pretty well as you like, and to keep it, all you have to do is keep the property and be in Spain 1 day a year, and you don't even have to be tax registered. But that amount was set in October 2013 when this part of the investment visa was created, and it hasn't changed since. And 10 years ago, it might have been quite a lot of money, but anybody who lives in London now and sells their property in London, it is not a lot of money. So there was last summer a move by a political party called Mas País to actually have it abolished. but they only account for 2.4% of the Spanish government, so it was actually thrown out. But it is understood that at the moment, the government is talking about whether they do abolish it or whether they double it. So there are changes afoot. At the moment in Spain, we have a bit of a hung parliament, and they're looking sort of for coalitions. And until that's resolved, which will likely be early next year, none of this legislation is likely to progress much. One of the reasons, though, I wanted to mention the golden visa is that we have seen some advertising, which is really thoroughly dishonest, saying you no longer have to buy a property for 500,000, you can do it for 350,000. It is not true. The 350,000 is 3% return on investment of £500,000 over 10 years for a completely different thing, and it's not something we deal with. It's for some sort of project which gives employment and one thing another, but it is not the same thing. It has not changed. It may be abolished. It's likely to be doubled. Right. And lastly, the non-lucrative visa. It's worth pointing out that after you've done a whole year on the non-lucrative visa, you can actually change it for a different visa. And we often get members asking, can they then change it to a work visa? And yes, they can. You can renew the golden visa after a year, either 60 days before it expires or 90 days afterwards. So you have to let it expire because you have to have been on it for a year. But then in that 90 days, you can apply for a working visa. It's not guaranteed, but it has some advantages. For if you're going to be an employee, the employer still has to get a work permit so that you can apply for the visa. But they no longer have to prove that there isn't anybody in Spain who could do the job already, because you are in Spain already. So from that point of view, it does make it a lot easier to get the working visa. And if you want to have the self-employed, the autonomo visa, it gives you a year to have practical knowledge of Spain. It gives you time to look for a business you might want to buy, which is a much easier way of doing it. And it gives you the experience of the market you're in so that you can actually put together a proper business plan, because to get that visa, you must have a really good business plan. And it's not something evaluated by the administrator the other side of the desk. It is actually evaluated by proper business people. And again, I would stress it isn't guaranteed that you can change, but it does happen in quite a lot of cases. Right, I think that's about the end of my visa update.
Thanks, Sally. And could you please also tell us about freedom of movement through EU citizenship?
Right, this is something that comes up quite a lot. So in the end, we thought we better address it. It's amazing how many people have people in their parents or grandparents who were from a different country. And amongst our United Kingdom members, a lot of them do have some Irish parentage. So in the end, we actually did a full post on how to become an Irish citizen and get an Irish passport. And in some cases, it's really not difficult. If you were born in Ireland before the 2005, or you were born abroad to Irish parents and they were born before 2005, you are deemed to be an Irish citizen, and you can just apply for a passport. And that's the easiest of all. You can also apply for citizenship if you were born after 2005 in Ireland to foreign parents, or if one of those parents was Irish or a UK citizen. You can apply for citizenship if one parent was legally resident for 3 out of 4 years before you were born in Ireland, or if you were born outside Ireland to an Irish parent. And that's quite straightforward. You have to confirm your citizenship and register your birth, because obviously you don't have an Irish birth certificate. But it's quite straightforward. And if you have a grandparent who was born in Ireland, you can also apply. It's a slightly more complicated situation, and it can take a year or so. But once you have an Irish passport, you are an EU citizen again, and you can have dual nationality with an Irish passport. You can have both Irish and English, United Kingdom citizenship. We also have a full post on Spain. Spain has really tried to open up, opening up the opportunity for people to apply for citizenship quite a lot. And at the moment, if you were born in Spain to foreign parents, right, to English parents, you're born in Spain, so long as you are in Spain resident for a year, you can apply for citizenship. That doesn't matter if you're a baby and your parents apply once you get to 1 year old because you're still living here. You can be 50 years old, having been born in Spain, you still have a Spanish birth certificate. You can move to Spain on a visa, and after a year, you can apply for citizenship. You can also apply after 1 year if you're married to a Spanish citizen. If you are from Latin American countries or Andorra, Philippines, Equatorial Guinea, Portugal, or if you're a Sephardic origin, you have to live. You can apply after you've been resident for 2 years. If you have refugee status, you can apply as citizenship after 5 years. And if you're just an ordinary resident, like most of us are, you can apply for citizenship after 10 years of legal residency. So it's not that difficult to apply for at least Spanish citizenship, but of course, Spain don't officially allow dual citizenship. You are supposed to renounce your UK or your other third country citizenship in most cases, not every, but in most. You can also opt for Spanish citizenship if you were born outside Spain to a Spanish parent, or if you were adopted by a Spanish parent, or and this is a new law, it's called the Ley de Nietos, it's the grandchild law. If you have a grandparent who left Spain for reasons of persecution, and it might be religion, it might be sexual orientation, it might be political, during the Spanish Civil War or during the dictatorship, you can actually apply for citizenship. Right, so that's Spain. It's quite an open door if you live here. It's also worth looking at other EU countries. Now, we don't really deal with this, but I did go through them just to see what each one offered and how easy it is. And the fact is, if you have a parent or possibly a grandparent who has the nationality of any of the EU countries, it is worth investigating whether you can actually get citizenship and apply for a passport. And having looked through, under the residency laws, it's somewhere between 1 and 10 years in pretty well every country. If you're resident legally for between 1 and 10 years, depending on the country, you can apply, as it's 10 years in Spain, but it can be 1 year if you're married to a Spanish person or whatever. But there is also the jus sanguinis, which is the blood tie. If you are born to a parent of EU nationality, in most countries, particularly if you have a birth certificate in that country, it's automatic. You can just apply for a passport. If you weren't born in that country, then you can still apply for citizenship. Marriage isn't always a factor. They do sometimes ask you to prove that your father really is your father, if he's the one that counts, but your parents don't actually have to be married necessarily. It does vary. But for some people, it is automatic. They don't have to go through the citizenship process. They can just apply for the passport. In some countries, you have to have one parent who was of that nationality at the time of your birth, right? It is sufficient to apply for citizenship in most of the EU countries in that situation, regardless of where you're born. But it isn't necessarily automatic. Sometimes you have to register as a citizen first. In some countries, it's only allowed through a parent. It's not allowed through a grandparent, for example, Sweden and the Netherlands. Adopted children, providing it's a full adoption, will often count. In other countries, it's possible through grandparents, such as in Portugal. Sometimes there are restrictions on your year of birth. For example, in Lithuania, you need to be between 18 and 36. If it's via grandparents and they were forced to leave the country for political reasons, much as in Spain for racial, sexual orientation, religious reasons, quite often you can apply then, even if it's grandparents. In Spain, of course, that was the civil war and the dictatorship years. In Germany, it's during the Nazi regime. In Latvia, it was those escaping the USSR and German occupation. Right. In some cases, such as Malta, the grandparents have to still be alive, but not usually in most of them. In a few countries, under certain conditions, it can be via great-grandparents. That includes Slovakia, Poland, and Lithuania, and sometimes again in those countries it's due to being exiled. In some cases, whoever you are claiming your ascendancy from or descendancy from, they do have to be alive, like Malta and Greece. Sometimes there's a restriction on family members, such as in Lithuania, they have to have been born between 1918 and 1940. A really interesting one is Luxembourg, and we do have several members who have recently acquired Luxembourg citizenship. Luxembourg only goes back through the male line, but providing you have a Luxembourg citizen in your male line going back to 1815, you can apply for citizenship. Or if it's through your mother, through her male line, it goes back to 1943. But, you know, that's quite a long way. And sometimes being born in overseas colonies will also count in exactly the same way as if you were born in the EU country. In France, it's if you were born between before 1994, but it also counts in Slovakia and in Poland. Okay, sometimes if you are born in a country to parents whose own country won't accept you because you weren't born there, that can also give you automatic citizenship. Yes, I think that's about it, really. It's quite easy and quite open. So if you look back and you've got a parent, a grandparent, or even sometimes a great-grandparent who was a member of an EU country, it's worth looking into whether you qualify for an EU passport. It will restore your freedom of movement, and the likelihood is you won't have to give up your own particular citizenship. Okay, I'm done.
Sally, thank you so much for that session. Right, so I'm just going to pass over to Javier now, who's going to tell us about updates to wealth tax in Spain. So over to you, Javier.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Sally, for the overview. Really nice. Well, I'm going to go through one of the taxes that is mainly charged on Spanish residents, and this is well known by all of us, but it's also part for it takes part also for non-resident citizens. It's the wealth tax that has been going in and out of the Spanish tax system. It's a central tax issued by the government, which is generally dealt by the comunidades autónomas, the autonomous communities. It has connection right now, and it has been really well published in the past, because some communities like Madrid or Andalusia apply some bonuses to the tax, which means in practice that the tax at the end was not charged to the taxpayer. Central government just approved the last year a new regulation which tries to avoid this by putting in place a new tax, which is the large fortune solidarity tax, which will take over, or which will tax those citizens who received some kind of bonus on the wealth tax. Okay, it's a yearly tax. It has to be paid every year, and it's connected with the value of the assets, properties, jewels, whatever asset that you may have at the end of the year. You have to make like a picture at the end of the year and see how your wealth is, and that will have to be communicated to the tax agency. There are a couple of exemptions to the assets, and it's a tax, as I've been explaining in the beginning, that applies for residents and non-residents. Okay, in connection with the wealth tax, as mentioned, is the solidarity tax on large fortunes. It was approved last year. It's at least is going to last for is going to be applied during 2022. That already took place, and 2023. Okay, it extends the tax to other individuals that were out of the scope of the wealth tax. It fights those communities that apply some kind of bonuses making the wealth tax not applied for citizens. And it has also some kind of exemptions, okay? The main thing is that this solidarity tax on large fortunes goes for amounts or wealths over 3 million euros. The wealth tax is going on 700,000 euros, basically. You have the solidarity tax liability scale, which starts in 3 million euros, okay? And then going just strictly talking about the wealth tax in Spain for residents, as mentioned, you have to make a close picture of your assets at the end of the year. You have to pay a tax on everything that you have as a resident, either in Spain or outside of Spain. You have to declare, and this connects this tax with the tax form 720 that possibly you have listened about, which is that you have to declare once that you became your first taxable year in Spain. You have to declare all your assets that you have abroad with a value over 50,000 euros. The tax has some kind of allowances, okay, that we will go through later on. And the tax is claimed to those citizens who have a wealth over 700,000 euros. On top of that 700,000 euros, you can apply some reductions, such as 300,000 euros for property and some others, okay? Even when you apply and when you use those deductions, and at the end you don't have to pay the tax, if your result is positive, you still have to submit the tax and you will pay 0. And if the total gross value of your assets exceeds 2 million euros, no matter what kind of deductions you apply, you still have to go through. In practice, last year in Andalusia, whoever exceeded 700,000 euros and reached like 3 million, less than 3 million, in Andalusia, you were not paying a single euro, okay, because the tax was bonus. And then the solidarity tax took place, and charge it or not, depending the situation and the case, okay? And then the assets to be considered when reviewing the wealth tax basically are the real estate, the bank deposits and investment, the stocks, luxury assets as jewelry, food courts, boats, things like this, antiquities and art objects, paintings, life insurances. Some kind of life insurances are taxable, and rights or other kind of administrative concessions and intellectual property rights. There are certain valuation rules, and this is always a matter of conflict. Why? Because while submitting the tax, you have to give the value a certain the asset a certain value, considering which type of asset. I have included the whole list. We will go basically through the usual ones, which is the real estate. You have to either give the purchase value or the officially assessed value. It often happens that you bought the property years ago, and people, try to reflect the value as the purchase value that came from probably 10 years ago, which will make impossible for you to reach the 700,000 euros limit. These kind of values that given considering the purchase value that happened years ago are possible to be reviewed by the tax agency. Okay, bank accounts, you have to have a look at the higher of the balance, either the one that appears on your account at the end of the year or the average balance of the last quarter, similar to the investment funds and things like this. And there are some other rules for specific assets like private company shares that are a little bit more technical and have to follow some valuation rules. Okay, this is the scale of the tax and how much you pay for each euro that exceeds the 700,000, okay? And the submission deadline. As some other taxes that take place in Spain, the submission is in June of the following year. So for this year, 2023, the timeline to submit will be the 30th of June of 2024. As mentioned, there are some exemptions, and some of those are really easy to see. Some others are a little bit more technical. In practice, the wealth tax has been a tax that some large fortunes in Spain have regularly avoid to pay, because when you have assets on a company that exceeds that exceed the 5% of the company shares, and that is mainly becoming the 50% of your earnings. Let's put, for example, the owner of Zara. Those assets are exempt of wealth tax. So you have them, but you don't pay for them. That's the structure or the scheme used for large fortunes, big fortunes in Spain, to avoid the wealth tax. And this is basically the consensus of it. I know that it has been like briefly exposed, but well, we can reply some other questions if any doubt comes out.
Right, thank you so much, Javier. So I'm going to tell you about inheritance tax. Let's move this slide. Right, so inheritance tax is an interesting topic. Years ago, in most regions where expats are based, there used to be really harsh taxation, even between close family, like between spouses and down to children. However, we've seen a very positive development in Spain, where many of the main regions where expats are based, we've seen the rules become much more favorable. So I'm going to talk you through this right now. So let's start with some of the key facts. So wealth tax in Spain will always apply to Spanish cited assets. So whether you have a property in Spain or cash in a Spanish bank, etc., that will always be assessed for Spanish inheritance tax. And if you live in Spain and receive an inheritance from anywhere in the world, then you'll be liable for tax on that as well. One of the key differences, if you compare to the UK, for example, is that in the UK, you talk about an estate, whilst in Spain, it's actually the beneficiary that is assessed for the tax. And for example, we go back to the UK again, if there is any UK inheritance tax charge at source in the UK, then that will be credited against your Spanish inheritance tax liability. So you don't pay the same tax twice. It's also important to know that Spain has 17 autonomous regions with different tax rules. So inheritance tax is different depending on the region. And I'm going to talk you through some of the positive developments that impacts most of the expats that we deal with. So just continue with some of the key facts. So the tax liability depends on a few factors, such as the Spanish region, the kinship, so that's how close you are to the deceased person, the amount that you receive, and sometimes the beneficiary's level of assets can impact as well. It's worth mentioning that inheritance tax rules are very closely aligned to gift tax rules. So whether if you have parents, for example, whether they give you a lifetime gift or whether you inherit their assets, normally tax treatment is pretty much the same. It's also worth pointing out, we discussed that the rules depend, tax depends on the kinship. So Spanish law has grouped beneficiaries into 4 different groups, where group 1 is the closest relatives and group 4 being the most distant relatives or persons with no relationship at all from a blood perspective. So group 1 is children and other descendants under the age of 21. Group 2 are descendants over 21, parents and other descendants, spouses. In some regions, civil partners are treated the same way as spouses for inheritance tax, but not all. So Andalusia and Valencia are 2 of those regions. But in other regions, civil partners could be treated as group 4. Group 3 will be siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, in-laws, and stepchildren. Stepchildren is very important to note because a lot of clients I deal with, they have 2nd or 3rd marriages, they have children from previous relationships. They're group 3, which normally don't have many exemptions, allowances, and there are ways to plan around it to make sure that they don't suffer a very heavy tax burden on your death. Group 4 is everyone else not listed above. So as we said earlier, it includes civil partners in regions which do not grant them the same rights as spouses. All right, so where have we seen changes in the last few years? Well, I'm going to talk you through the regions which I think impact most of the people that listen to this webinar. So Andalusia amended the rules a few years ago, and the latest changes became effective on the 1st of January 2022. The Balearics changed the rules very recently on the 18th. They became effective on the 18th of July this year. Canary Islands changed rules which became effective on the 6th of September this year. Galicia changed them a few years ago on the 1st of Jan 2020. Madrid, 1st of Jan 2007. So they've had really good rules for a long time now. Murcia amended the rules on the 1st of Jan 2018. And Valencia has been recent as well. It became effective on the 28th of May 2023 as the changes that were made with the new regional government were actually backdated. Right, so let's continue. So let's give you some examples of how the wealth tax rules look now. I'm going to talk you through some of the key regions. Let's start with Andalusia. So I've grouped together the closest relatives. So you have spouse, civil partners, children and grandchildren. They get a €1 million allowance each. And anything not covered by that allowance has a 99% tax relief. So practically, inheritance tax has been abolished or eliminated in Andalusia for very close family members. However, we see in the bottom box that stepchildren, nieces, nephews, siblings, and unrelated persons do not get these benefits. So tax liabilities can start applying from 8,000 or 10,000, depending on the exact group you're in. And the tax rates can go between 7% and 49%, depending on the amount and relationship with the donor. And there can be a main home relief as well if you live with a deceased person. Right, so let's look at Balearics. So Balearics have made really good changes impacting spouses, civil partners, children and other descendants, including adopted. By the way, in all the regions, children normally include adopted children as well. Parents and other descendants. So they get 100% tax relief. There's no tax payable at all. However, nieces, nephews, uncles, aunties, and siblings, they get a 50% tax relief when you have no children, or 25% tax relief when you do have children, but they were not disinherited. And in-laws get a 25% tax relief when there are children who have not been disinherited. Right, so let's look at Canary Islands. This is the most recent change. This is one of the most favorable regions right now from an inheritance tax perspective, because there's a very large group of beneficiaries, including what's normally grouped into group 3, which in most other regions do not qualify for benefits, like nephews, nieces, siblings, uncles, and aunties. They get a 99.99% tax relief. So there's, in practice, no inheritance tax bill for them. And everyone else, which is very few people that don't qualify, they get no relief. So that can be like friends, etc. But there's no blood relationship. If we look at Murcia, Murcia is very closely aligned to Andalusia, very similar rules. So there's a 99% tax relief for close family, and other members, which we see in the bottom, like stepchildren, usual ones, nephews, nieces, siblings, etc. They don't get this tax relief, and it can be taxed on anything received from 8,000 plus, and the tax rate can go from 8% to 89%. So it can be quite harsh if you are on that group of beneficiaries. And then if we look at Valencia, so there's been some recent changes there as well. So you can get a 99% tax relief, and there's also 100,000 reduction on top of it. And there's also still a gift tax allowance every 5 years for 100,000. And anyone not qualifying for that, again, stepchildren, nephews, nieces, etc., they are treated pretty much the same as in Murcia. Right, so we're gonna move on now, and I'm gonna pass on to Kelly, who's gonna tell us about inland property regulations. Over to you, Kelly.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay, well, my name is Kelly, and my company's called Mediterranean Homes. We specialize in properties in the area of Malaga, But what makes us a little bit different from other real estate companies is that we specialize in country property. And the rules and regulations on these types of homes can be very complex. To give you an example, there was an important change in law in December of 2021, which has actually made it much easier for us and obviously for sellers that are selling property. To keep it simple, properties that were built on protected lands, in the majority of the cases, they can now be registered correctly if they have over 6 years of antiquity. So we've noticed that since the end of 2021 up until now, this has helped a lot of sellers that did have, issues with their properties, that they couldn't get them registered. They're actually being able to solve these problems now and being able to sell their properties without any hassle. We're based west of Malaga. We mainly cover the area of Alarino Grande, Coín, the Guadalhorce Valley, basically, is the area that we cover. If anybody is thinking of buying or selling property in this area, we'd be more than happy to sit down and have a chat with them and explain to them the whole process, because as I said initially, country properties can be very challenging, and it's always important to speak with someone that understands the rules and regulations that are applied to these properties. We've also noticed, especially this year, we've had an increase in American buyers as well. Not all are looking at applying for the golden visa. But I, for example, I'm half American, and I've never had as many American clients looking at investing in this country as there have been in the last 12 months. So I think for American clients, Irish clients, and British clients, it's very important that they speak with you guys before they actually take the plunge, because I think that with the experience that you all have, you can definitely advise them on what they should and shouldn't do, because at the end of the day, ultimately you can save them a lot of money. So I do think it's important that especially those three buyers from those three countries do consider speaking with all of you before actually starting to look for property in this part of Spain.
Right, thank you so much, Kelly. Yeah, and Javier and myself, we actually we can help American and Canadian people as well down here. So that's certainly something that we are happy to do, and some other firms are not able to do that. Right, so we're going to move on now. I mean, we've done all the topics already, so we've been covered, and now it's just about to see if there are any questions. So I've just had a look at the chat box, and I couldn't see any questions. So if you have any question, this is the right time to ask us. So please type it in the chat box if you have any question. And it's quite normal for these type of events that people come to us after the event because they have something very personal they want to ask it. They don't want to ask it in a public forum. So we are available after this webinar to speak to you if you want to raise any private questions with us. Right, so I'm going to have another look, and I don't think I can see any questions. Let me have a look again. No, nothing. Okay, that's great. So quick and easy this time. Right, and I'm gonna put our details on the screen. So right, I'd like to thank Sally, Kelly, and Javier for having joined us today, and I hope that you found this a useful session for yourself. Now, I wonder if Javier, if you can maybe just give us some information about what you can do, how can you help expatriates here in Spain?
Well, we have a law firm based in Malaga and in Marbella. We help with mainly tax, labor advice, bookkeeping services, and everything related to civil law, such as purchases, inheritances, and company law. We don't deal just with criminal law. Okay, we leave this for other. So, well, mostly of our clients are foreign clients, mostly British, and as Kelly has just pointed out, we have realized about a big number of American clients coming out to invest in Spain. It's a nationality that was not really usual to see here buying properties, especially in Malaga downtown. You can find them like buying in the coast, but inland and Malaga town was not usual at all, and now it comes. So well, we are pleased to help everybody who needs a little bit of advice.
Thank you, Javier. And Sally, could you please also remind us how your Facebook group After Brexit in Spain can help people who want to either move down to Spain or already living in Spain?
Yeah, sure. We have a huge library of posts, most of which have been done by myself or my co-admin, Rachel Warnes. We only use UK or Spanish government sources, and we spend quite a lot of our time actually translating the Spanish bulletins, legal bulletins, which, you know, takes some doing, but we have a good library of them. We basically cover every aspect of a visa or moving to Spain. We don't really deal with tax, although sometimes we wrote poor old John in to give some answers on inheritance tax and wealth tax. He's very good for that. But if you're visiting Spain, if you want to live in Spain, if you want citizenship in Spain, or if particularly during the time of COVID, you were traveling to Spain and you needed to know what you needed to do, how valid is your passport, when should you renew it? We have posts on literally everything. Changing your driving license, rematriculating your car, how long you can drive your UK car for when you bring it over. We have literally posts on everything. And every day we have about 10 to 15 questions, which generally Rachel and I answer. We also have 3 moderators, Jackie, Helen and Mike sometimes answers as well, because he's actually married to a Spanish person, so he understands aspects of the law from a very personal angle. And basically anything you need to know about coming to Spain, we're likely to have a post on. And even if we haven't, we will research it. We're just very good at researching things now. And everybody is welcome. You can join the group. You can ask for participation permission if you want to actually comment or put up a post. Or you can just view everything on the site without having to join at all. So, and we like to think we're a nice, safe space for people to come to. They can ask what they like. We don't allow free for all of members. We're quite strict on that. And just generally, if you want to know something, ask us. It's as simple as that.
Thank you, Sally. And Kelly, can you please just tell us how you can help people who want to move down to Andalusia to live a relaxed lifestyle inland?
Well, as long as the client knows what they want and the dream home that they want to buy, we'll do everything we can to find that property for them. I mean, obviously it's important because if a client, for example, needs a mortgage and they're looking at buying a country property, we're able to advise a client which bank to approach, which bank valuation company to approach, which lawyer is the best lawyer that can help them with country property. So yeah, we need to speak with the client first, find out exactly what they want, and then we will do everything we can to try and help them find their dream home.
That's great. Thank you so much. So we discussed some really positive developments today linked to taxation, such as inheritance tax. But we've seen that there are still ways that people can be caught into these taxes, for example, with stepchildren, etc. And you can still be liable for wealth tax in certain regions and solidarity tax over Spain still, if you have very large amounts of assets. So there are ways to reduce these taxes with financial planning, and this is something that myself and Javier are specializing in. So please get in touch with us if you have any specific questions, if you want to see how we can help you to plan ahead before you move down to Spain, to see what your tax liability would be and how we can restructure your assets to reduce your liabilities. And just to remind you again that I'm offering free consultations, which you can book if you just hold up your smartphone and scan the QR code, which you see on the screen. It allows you to book a free video call consultation directly into my calendar. So feel free to do so. I'll be really happy to speak with you. Right, just going to check if there are any last minute questions. There is a question, right. So we have a question from Aaron. What are the traveling rules once you move to Spain? For example, I like to travel in my home. Can I travel throughout Europe freely once we move to Spain? So this is probably a question for you, Sally. Would you be happy to pick that up?
I presume M home is motorhome. Aaron, it depends on what your citizenship is. If you are a UK citizen, even if you have residency in Spain, you are still limited to the 90 in 180 days Schengen rule in all other European countries. And I suspect that is probably what does relate to you. If you're if you have an EU passport, then no problem at all. But every country has a rule that says after you've been in that country for X number of consecutive days, you have to register. In Spain, it's 90, and I think it's probably 90 in most of them, but not all, and you'd have to check that out. So if you are a resident of Spain and you want to go to France, for example, you can be in France for 90 days, but you then have to move on. If you're, well, yes, regardless actually whether you're EU citizen or British, but if you're a British citizen, I'm afraid you're only allowed 90 days in 180 in the whole of the rest of Europe. Doesn't count for Spain because you're resident there, but for the whole of the rest of Europe. If you are an EU citizen, then it's whatever consecutive days, usually 90 in each country, but you can move to another Schengen country, that doesn't matter. Okay, if that doesn't answer your question enough, please do come on to After Brexit in Spain, and please do ask on there, and we will give you a more complete answer with more details from you.
Yeah, recommending anyone to join After Brexit in Spain. It's a really good group, which I'm part of, and there are lots of very, very good question answers answered there with very obviously reliable answers as well, because Sally and Rachel do a really good job in checking that all the sources they use are fully trustworthy, and often it's the public official sources like VOE.
Absolutely. Can I also just say, John, the group we are volunteers. There is no paid service behind the group. Everything is completely free. Whatever we advise you on, whatever we give you, it is free. There's absolutely no charge for anything. So you just come on if you want to.
Yeah. So I'm really sorry that we run over time a bit, but it's been so many topics and so many updates that we had to go through, and hopefully you found that this was a relevant session. So everyone who registered will soon receive an email with our contact details and a link to the recording of this webinar, and feel free to send it on to anyone you think might find it of interest. So thanks again to Javier, Sally and Kelly, and thanks to everyone who's been watching, and we hope to be back from you soon, and we are looking to do these kind of events in the future on a regular basis. If you think this was a good event, then feel free to share it and give us feedback, and we would really appreciate it. Many thanks and goodbye everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.